I am really excited because we're going to be talking about the 50-minute book review for Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win, and that's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. So this actually is a book that I learned about from a friend of mine. So I had actually recommended The Effective Executive to him, and he said to me, have you ever read this book? This was maybe about a year ago, and I hadn't. I picked it up, I read it, and I absolutely love it. And that's the reason why it made it onto my book list and why we're talking about it today on my book summary, which reminds me that if you have any favorite business books that you love, please send me a note and make a recommendation. Maybe I've read it and I might want to put it on my list and do a review of the book. Maybe I haven't read it, and that's an opportunity for me to learn about a new book because it feels like there's just so many out there. So really quickly before we start, I just wanted to remind everybody that as an executive coach, I help corporate leaders to do their best work. I do that through both group or one-on-one workshops, and you can always check out dionthewriter.com to see what workshops are available. So with that, I'm going to dive right into the book summary of Extreme Ownership. So the reason why this book resonated with me so much, I think, is because it speaks to the whole concept of accountability and ownership, as the title suggests. And also another term that you might have heard before is radical accountability. These all fall into the same realm of the same types of concepts around people, leaders in particular, who take ownership, and they know that the buck stops with them. What's really interesting and captivating about this particular book is that it does a comparison between the world of Navy SEALs, which is different, but you'll learn not so different than the corporate world, and of course the business world, and the fact that and leadership skills are needed in both worlds. So they do a great comparison of the two, and they share a lot of stories of their days as Navy SEALs, the time that they spent in particular in Afghanistan, and some of their training examples as well, to really bring some of their stories to light and shed light on some of the leadership concepts that make you an effective Navy SEAL. And I think it becomes very clear very quickly how those translate over to what it takes to be a really effective leader within an organization. So just quickly before I jump into some of the lessons, because I'm going to share some of the takeaways specifically that I got from this book, but back to the extreme ownership, the radical accountability. The reason why I love that so much is because any really good organization that I've ever worked with has embraced that concept to some degree. And what it means is people take ownership for things. So even if you're going to be asking a question and it might not be in my area of expertise, rather than just saying, no, sorry, I don't know anything about that, or no, that's not in my job description, or whatever term people use. Instead, people are very eager to think, okay, well, no, actually, I can't help you with that, but let me see who I could put you in touch with. So there's this feeling of, even though I can't specifically answer your question, I take ownership for giving you a warm handoff to someone who can, which is great for internally because it helps us to be more effective and get our problem solved faster. But you can imagine how effective that is when it comes to clients. And when clients might happen to stumble across the wrong area to answer the question that they need, and rather than just saying, oh, sorry, you called the wrong number, or we don't do that here, people who take ownership of that client and want to make sure that their problem gets resolved and get them to the right place. So all of that is encapsulated with extreme ownership. So quickly, one of the big takeaways for this is that there are no bad teams. There are only bad leaders. And that point is driven home in this book. They talk about the fact that the buck stops with the manager. And as the manager, you ultimately take responsibility. And they talk about, even with some of their operatives or even some of their training exercises, when things don't go well, and they're doing the post-mortem afterwards, the people who separate themselves out and get on that track, those leadership tracks within the Navy SEALs, are absolutely not the people who are very quick to say, oh, well, this person was supposed to do that, and well, this area didn't do their job, whatever. The people who get onto that leadership track are the ones who stop. They take a look in the mirror and they figure out, well, well, how did I contribute to this? How could I have helped this to be a better situation? So it's very much about taking ownership. And there's a great example in the book about a boat race. So what they did is they split up the teams into different, this is in training, into different teams, and they were racing each other. So there was one particular team that was doing really, really badly. They were in last place. And then there was another team that was in first place. So at the end of that, what happened is they decided as a test, they were going to, rather than change around the teams, because how often is it that we're thinking, oh, well, yeah, they succeed because they have so many winning players. Or of course they didn't do well because look at who they have on their team. But what they did is they swapped the leaders, and then that last place team ended up winning in the second round of heats. And actually the first place team that now had the leader who was in the last place team before, they didn't come in last. They actually came in third place. But the point of the entire exercise is the fact that the leader or the team captain was the one who was able to inspire their team members, look around, see who was good at what, make sure that everybody was pulling their weight and giving them encouragement and really optimizing the skills of the team. Now, the team that was in first place and then got the captain who was originally in last place, they didn't come in last place because the team had already adopted some of those characteristics themselves. So they were kind of overriding the fact that the leader was not that good, and they were working through it themselves in terms of trying to optimize themselves and pull together as a team. And anyway, so the point of that whole example was to show the fact that leaders make all the difference in the world. You could have the exact same people, but when you have a leader who knows how to optimize team members, how to inspire people, how to give them instructions, how to make sure that everybody's carrying their own weight, the results speak for themselves. The second thing around the role of leaders has to do with the fact that it's not what you preach, but it's what you tolerate. So this is a big theme when it comes to corporate world, where many of you have probably been on teams where you've had people who have not been pulling their weight, but for whatever reason, the team just figures out, okay, well, we're just going to work around these folks. So what it talks about is the fact that strong leaders do not tolerate subpar performance by their team members. So as the leader, again, the buck stops with you. So what they'll talk about is if somebody is not pulling their weight, the leader is really the person who has to stop and assess, take a look in the mirror and figure out, okay, well, what does this person need? Does this person need training? Is it the fact that they don't know how to do their role? Maybe it's coaching in terms of helping them to take the initiative, do some problem solving on their own, or feedback in terms of when they do things, giving them feedback on how they could get better. So again, it really is the manager's job to figure out what it is that that person needs and to help to set them up for success. Once they've done that, however, and they notice that that individual either is unwilling or maybe incapable of getting better, it is also that manager's role to pull the trigger and call it like it is and just have that conversation to say, you know what, this is probably not the best place for you. This is probably not an area of your strength. And that person should not be remaining on the team, because when you have subpar performers on a team, what it really does is it demotivates your strong performers. Because when you're a strong performer and you're on a strong team and everybody's pulling their weight, it's actually inspiring. You're part of something bigger. Everybody's kind of motivating each other and bringing out the best in each other. But when you have a handful of strong performers and some other folks on the team who are not pulling their weight, it's demotivating. And that those strong performers actually feel like they are carrying everybody else. It's not inspiring. It doesn't bring out the best in them. And what you'll find is those strong performers might kind of pull back a bit, because it's like, okay, well, why am I doing all of this if other people are able to just, put in 40 or 60% and they still get to fly by with the results of the overall team? Or you'll find some of those strong performers looking elsewhere to go someplace else. So this is, again, where it comes back to the fact that it's the manager's job to really make sure that they're optimizing the team and to not tolerate folks who, like I said, are either unwilling or potentially they're incapable of really coming up to what's required for the job. They talk about the leaders having to believe in the mission. So, and again, when it comes to Navy SEALs, as you can imagine, there's inherent risk. And many times it's actually life or death, some of these missions that they're going out on. So it's really critical that the leader believes in it, commits to it 100%, and then they're able to then inspire their team members to come along as well and to also commit 100% to the mission. So if we translate that over into the corporate world, there are many times where, there are leaders who maybe don't 100% buy into whatever the strategy is or the mission is. And still the expectation is, of course, the other team members are going to buy in as well. And what it's saying here is absolutely not. You have to lead by example as the manager and demonstrate the fact that you're all in. And now it's for the team to be all in as well. And I'll give you a really quick anecdote for this one, where I once worked with on a project with a leader. And I remember she was so frustrated because her team members were kind of demotivated. People always used to have cynical comments to make. And she was, frustrated and complained like, oh, I need people on board. I need people who are more positive. So I had the unlucky job of having to tell her that the person who was the biggest culprit of being cynical and having negative comments was actually her. So again, the conversation went well. She was very gracious and she thanked me for my candor and letting her know. However, I will say that before I gave her that feedback, she used to invite me out for lunch at least once a week. And after giving her the feedback, I was never invited out for lunch again. But that's something that I am willing to live with. So again, as the leader, you are the one who sets the example. You're the one who has to be bought in 100%. And then you're demonstrating to your team. And only at that point can you expect them to jump in 100% as well. A couple other quick things as time is going is making sure that you get comfortable with making decisions with less than 100% of the information that you would ideally like to have. So again, on the battlefront and so forth, it's so common that they're in situations where they're not able to get access to all the information that they want. However, they have to make a decision, split second. Sometimes it's life or death in the moment with everything they have available to them and make the best possible decision. And if it turns out that it wasn't the best decision, they have to also be open to adjust. So this is another big one where I do find sometimes in the corporate world where leaders and individuals in general are reluctant sometimes to make decisions, not because they don't want to make a decision, but more because people are so afraid of making the wrong decision. So I think the message here is we don't always have time, or we often, I would say, don't have time to gather 100% of the information. Sometimes you're never going to have 100% of the information. So get comfortable moving ahead with 60% or however much information you could pull together, and have a mindset that as things develop, as circumstances change, as new information becomes available to you, that you are then able to adjust, because that is more realistic and it keeps the ball moving as opposed to trying to wait for the utopia where you have all the information that you ever want. And the final point that I'm going to call out that they stress in this book is about discipline. So from a Navy SEAL perspective, a lot of their job does happen to be very physical. So they focus a lot about physical conditioning. And even when they're not on a mission, making sure that they're always in physical conditioning, which makes their job easier, carrying equipment, doing all the different things that they have to do when they are on a mission. It makes it that much easier. So again, if we translate that over to the corporate world, this has to do with figuring out what's really important. So in many organizations, there are always fires that need to be put out, escalations and so forth. And often those things can pull us away from those activities that we just know routinely will set ourselves and our teams up for success. So what is stressed here is the fact that as the manager, it's critical for your success to have the discipline to make sure that you're always finding time for those things. And an example that I will share are things like, some managers have said to me things like, you know what, coaching my team members, if I take the time and do our regular coaching sessions, the performance is better. Another one is sometimes people want to spend time out in the field. They might want to go out and spend time once a month, let's say, with their frontline team members, or they want to go out on client visits and make sure that they're still connected with clients. But these are the things that get pushed to the side when there are escalations or, endless meetings that we find ourselves in. So what this book stresses is making sure that as managers, we have the discipline to make sure that we are making the time for those things that are not urgent, but they're critical in terms of setting ourselves and our teams up for success. So with that, I want to just stress again how much I enjoyed this book. In preparing to prep for this call and going through all my notes, it actually kind of got me thinking I actually want to read this book again because it was such a fun read the first time. There's so many great nuggets of information that are filled, and it's a really fun read as well. So I hope you do choose to read Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And thanks for tuning in here to check out my 15-minute book summary, and look out for the next one. Thanks for listening to my 15-minute book review. If you like this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you'll be alerted anytime there's a new video uploaded. I offer both group and individual workshops, so head to DionneTheWriter.com to see what's available and to sign up. And finally, you can follow me on my social media platforms at either Dionne the Writer or Dionne England. Look forward to seeing you next time.